Hello and welcome to another album autopsy. Today we're delving into the rock band Coldplay and their third studio album from 2005, which was X and Y. Before we do start to dissect and really take the album apart track by track, a little bit more about the band. They actually formed back in 1996 when they met at University College London. All four members did study there, obviously world champion Chris Martin, Guy Berryman and Johnny Buckland. And they really kind of started off as a very interesting band. They started off as Pectorals from 96 until 98 before becoming Starfish for a couple of years until they did settle on the band name of Coldplay. They're also one of the few bands still going today that actually have a lineup that's consisting of just the core members. They've never had a lineup change in the 25 years that they have been performing together, which is certainly quite a big feat by today's standards. As for the album itself, it obviously followed on the success of their two previous albums, Parachutes in 2000 and Rush of Blood to the Head in 2002. So this album actually does have kind of a few underlying themes behind it and a couple of influences that Chris Martin really drew on for the actual album. First of all, being the whole X and Y, it's definitely something you can associate with relationships, the whole idea of X chromosomes, Y chromosomes, and it's also that yin and yang, and that's something that he's talked about in quite a few interviews over the years. There's a lot of variation on this album, of some faster paced songs, some slower pace, and you can really see the comparison between these two styles they've managed to really fit into one album. Also, around the same time that he began writing the album, his now ex-wife Gwyneth Paltrow, her father Bruce Paltrow, actually did pass away, and she went into quite a heavy depression. So there's actually quite a few songs that he actually wrote for her, very personal. And despite this personal touch, he's kind of warped them into this sense of songs that you can kind of associate with yourselves, even though you're not in his shoes, which is a great thing that he's been able to do as a songwriter, as you'll see as we do move through it track by track. Kicking off the album, we do have Square One, and there's not really any other place this song could have gone on the album. It just wouldn't make sense having Square One as track number 7, and this is a song that actually kind of puts you at your current moment in life. It's a song that kind of says that you've got your own story to write it the way you want to. The future's not yet written. You are in complete control over what you want to do, and this is very reflective in the lyrics as well. You're in control. Is there anywhere you want to go? You choose the path that you walk. You choose which routes you take in life, and although yes, there are certain obstacles in the way, you are the one ultimately making those decisions. From the top of the first page to the end of the last day, again referencing this life cycle, you're currently at the top of the first page. The rest isn't written yet. You've got that option to go out there and really make it your own. And a couple of the lyrics can be a bit more on the negative side of things. You wonder if your chance will ever come, and that I think that talks back to the idea of you have these elements in your life that you don't always control. Not every decision is going to go your way, and not everything is going to turn out exactly how you want it. But this is definitely a song that just kind of looks at where you're currently at now. You're starting in square one and moving your way towards the end of the last page effectively, which is just a nice, great way to open the song and kind of give us a feel for what kind of music we can expect to hear further on down the line. With track 2, we do have What If, and already we're going to be seeing this yin and yang, this X and Y really come into force on this particular album. It is obviously a much slower laid back track, also a much more negative kind of meaning and connotations to it. It's kind of about fear and distress of rejection when it comes to love. But despite of this idea that it's quite negative, it does actually kind of transition through the song into a more hopeful ending, which is really nice, a nice contrast of the two sides of that sometimes that fear can actually turn into something fruitful, but it's kind of about taking that risk. And again, Chris Martin's very good when it comes to writing all these kinds of different styles of lyrics. It's something he's done very, very well over the years, and as he's continued to evolve as a lyricist. And what if you should decide that you don't want me there by your side? This is towards the beginning of the track. We're seeing this kind of this lack of faith or hope that it's actually going to work out, and it's this very negative side. But as we do transition towards the later verses, it kind of changes, takes a bit of an alternate step about take a breath, jump over the side. It's about taking this chance, take this chance with me. Let's try something together. How can you know how can you know if you don't even try? So it's kind of that question of putting it out to somebody, to a lover or someone that you want to kind of to be your lover, saying like, give me a chance and we'll make it worth it. We'll take that risk together. And that's obviously how it works for a lot of relationships. So some of it comes down to chance, some of it comes down to fate and a variety of things. But it's nice to just have this kind of alternate twist towards the end, kind of saying take this leap of faith, and doesn't make it a completely sad song despite the very slow pace of it. Filling in at number 3, we do have White Shadows. Now, I did mention, obviously, this album, kind of some of the inspiration was taken from the passing of Gwyneth Paltrow's father, and this is the first of those tracks to do so. For those of you that don't know, he was actually a Hollywood producer, hence why she kind of got into acting. Obviously, she's best known as playing the part of Pepper in the Iron Man and kind of the Marvel Universe series, so quite a big name in terms of the acting world. But this song actually refers back to him. He actually worked on a production called The White Shadow. It was actually about a film or a series that was made about a white man being on an all-black basketball team. So despite this idea, you think, well, how does this revolve around the song? How can this be universally applied to us? And it's about not being afraid to be different. The fact of we're all part of the human race, all of the stars in the outer space. So through these lyrics, again, he's pulling everybody in and giving people this reason, this thing they can connect to with this particular track. We all probably feel different in one way or another, whether it be kind of a personality trait, how you look. You shouldn't be judged for the decisions you make, and it's something that's become very big in recent years. And that's what a great thing is. I love how he's turned this personal song that has a certain meaning to him, but made it universally available to a listening audience, to something that everybody can attest to and apply to their own lives, which he certainly did very well with this track. Track 4 needs absolutely no introduction. It's become one of the biggest tracks in Coldplay's discography over the years, alongside many of the others, including Yellow and some of the more recent kind of upbeat tracks. And we're kind of sticking with that theme again, that X and Y. We've had White Shadows, much faster pace, quite kind of big on the guitar riffs. Now we're moving straight back into Fix You, this very slow song that does pick up towards the end. And it's another song that it was written for Gwyneth Paltrow after her father passing away. When you lose something you can't replace, being arguably the biggest lyric. But the beauty of this actual lyric means that you don't just have to apply it to a father figure. We've all lost people in our lives that we can kind of tie this to. You can't replace a certain person in your life when it comes to family, friends, or something otherwise. So it's, again, another song that everyone can connect to, and I think that's part of the reason it's become arguably one of their biggest songs, because of the fact it has that universal appeal to almost everybody, and everyone can associate with it. And that's what they've managed to really do, and it's a huge song that you can't avoid. You still hear it, or probably on a weekly basis, whether it be via radio or anything like that. It's also one of the biggest songs they do in their set list live. It's absolutely huge hearing an entire stadium sing along to this particular track, and it certainly is a very beautiful one at that. For track 5, we do have Talk, and I love the kind of the music they used for this. For those of you that don't know, it was inspired by Kraftwerk's 1982 single Computer Love. They actually get permission to use the sample from it as the backing track, and it is a very iconic 80s song. And obviously Kraftwerk, the kind of the godfathers of synth, hailing from obviously Germany, and they really brought to life a lot of the music that we do here today. So it was nice to hear kind of a little tribute to them used on this on X and Y and included in the album. But this song is actually about feelings of insecurity and how talking can really kind of open doors and kind of improve your situation. And for many of us, that can be a very big obstacle. It can be hard sometimes if something's bothering you, having that person you can confide in, that you can talk to. But that's what this song is ultimately about. Do you feel like a puzzle, you can't find your missing piece, where you kind of feel insecure, don't feel like you can talk to someone, by doing so, you find that missing piece and feel like you're able to open up and become complete again. And that's what the song tends to heavily revolve around. Despite the fact the music video kind of has this robot on the moon, and it's a little bit weird in terms of the music video, and doesn't seem to fully fit with the theme of the actual song itself. But it's certainly one of the songs that, despite being released as a single, wasn't arguably one of the biggest tracks on the album. It's kind of one that gets drowned out amongst some of the others, including Fix You and a couple of others we've got to still discuss. Time for another slow and very personal track to Chris Martin in at number 6. It's the title track of X and Y. And this is a song about attempting but not always succeeding to comfort his wife during the kind of very dark time she endured following the passing of her father. But then again, it's something we can all attest to. I mean, we've seen how it can affect people around us when somebody does pass away. It can be very difficult. People can fall into the depressions or very kind of really rough states, and sometimes it can be very difficult to kind of pick them out of it. And it creates this disparity between two people, this X and this Y, because you've got one person that we're kind of trying to help them out with that's in a much more positive mindset, and this Y that's kind of really down in the dumps and really struggling. So you've got this comparison. It can cause tension and friction and cause this opposition of people that can ultimately make things far more difficult. Talks about it through the lyrics as well. I know something is broken and I'm trying to fix it, trying to repair it any way I can. He's trying to do everything in his power to really kind of make this person feel better. And we've all kind of gone through it. When someone's sad, we just want to make them feel as good as they can. We'll do anything it takes most of the time to make that happen. So it can always be a bit of an uphill struggle, but just great how they've used the title of the actual album itself to kind of really show that contrast between the two characteristics. Time for arguably the second biggest track on X and Y, which is Speed of Sound, another song that kind of really kind of picked them up and kind of really got made waves in the chart. So despite the fact in the UK it was only, I think, in the top 10, it topped in at number 7. It didn't have massive success, wasn't able to kind of reach that number 1 spot, but was certainly quite a big track nonetheless. And had some interesting inspirations. It was actually inspired by Chris's and Gwyneth's daughter Apple, as well as Kate Bush. Interesting combination for inspiring a song, but it's actually a song about awe and wonderment, and they did that through the music video. It was very well kind of perceived through that, this bright screen behind the band filling up with colour, and it's about kind of just enjoying the world and the great things within it. And it's again this X and Y album. They didn't want to just make an album full of sad songs that were just kind of got people down. They were quite known for that between the first two albums, between Parachutes, between A Rush of Blood to Dead, and everyone said that they're kind of the band that if you listen to if you're in a really bad mood and you just want to stay sad for the rest of the day. But this is definitely a kind of more upbeat song. Again, that transition between the two styles, and they didn't want to fill the album just with kind of slow, kind of sad songs. So this is definitely a pickup song about enjoying the world around you, really just making the most of it. If you never try, you'll never know. How long am I going to stand with my head stuck under the sand? Being another lyric that's kind of referencing to that, saying like, if you keep your head under the sand and don't go out there and enjoy all these wonderful things, they will gradually just pass you by. Filling in at track number 8, we do have A Message. And this song takes inspiration from something very, very old in the form of John Ireland's 1664 hymn, My Song Is Love Unknown, which actually they do reference and is actually used as part of the lyrics for this track. And it is a love song about reaching out to somebody, about kind of staying there for somebody and kind of being willing to wait for them. So it's just definitely another song that they kind of like to do a lot of in a lot of their albums. A lot of their songs revolve around love relationships, and obviously with the title being X and Y, yes, it could reference to kind of chromosomes and the whole different genders, kind of a relationship coming together effectively. So that's definitely kind of one way of looking at it. But it was mainly inspired by the idea that Chris Martin kind of quite enjoyed hymns. It's one of his favourite hymns that he just loves to just sing along to. So he just decided he wanted to really use that as the inspiration for making it into a track. And he certainly did a very wonderful job of making it into that and really just turning a hymn into what became quite a big song. And it's a song that, despite not being the biggest on the album, certainly kind of caused quite an impact with a variety of different critics upon the album's initial release. For track 9, we are sticking with the love song ideas that he did have for the inspiration for this album. And this is actually a love song about fighting depression. Again, I talked about Gwyneth Paltrow, about her going through a very depressive period following her father's death. And this was about Chris's attempts to really kind of reassure her and how it didn't quite plan out and how it can actually affect the person trying to heal this other person over time. How depression can kind of is contagious effectively and can cause quite a few issues. And I'm sure many people have seen that. You see, especially like in modern day, depression has become a very big thing, and it can kind of make it hard for people to kind of approach others that are dealing with it. And you want to help them, but sometimes trying to help them and work through things with them can be very kind of destroying on your own mental health as well. So this is a song that definitely has like a standalone story effectively, and it's done very well through the lyrics. Starts off with, obviously, you see the world in black and white, no colour or light, and that's definitely a reference to you're not seeing things as happy as you used to be. You're not seeing things, if you're not seeing colour, you're seeing things very blandly, and it kind of definitely revolves into this developing love song, but you mean more to me than any colour I can see. So it's kind of him trying to break through, saying, look, you mean this much to me, I want you to be back to your happy self. But then as we do head further and further towards the outro, this is where we start to see this slight shift in his kind of temperament, and with one of the outro lyrics is "'cause I feel low," and it's referencing how he's kind of, the depression is causing him, trying to help his wife is effectively causing him to go through these down feelings effectively, and that's certainly something that many people will attest to, and they have seen obviously having people in their lives that are suffering from certain kind of ailments, whether it be depression or something else, how sometimes it can certainly be contagious and be very damning to our own mental health. We're now entering the double digits, which means it's track 10. It is the hardest part, and we're almost going through a bit of a storyline really of a relationship, going through it effectively with this particular track, because this is, as you can imagine, what's the hardest part of a relationship? I mean, many would say certain different things, but the end of one is always probably one of the hardest things, because it's not something that everybody always wants to do, especially if love's involved. And obviously I think for quite a number of years after this album was released, obviously Gwyneth and Chris split up. They kind of said it was very amicable, but they just decided they'd grown as different people. But obviously this song could be like an early warning sign effectively as to what was kind of working for them and what's happening with them. Obviously we've just talked about the depression, how it's made him feel low, and we've gone straight on to this breaking of a relationship. So it's almost like it's going from a story started at square one, we're moving right through effectively the kind of the storyline of this relationship, and it talks about you really breaking my heart, and then it goes into quite a bit of self-loathing, which most people do following a breakup, whether it's eating a full tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream or just crying into a pillow for 3 days straight. There's always kind of that self-loathing involved, and it shows how it affects on him effectively. It's almost from his perspective, and I tried to sing but I couldn't think of anything. He's kind of wrote these love songs for it, it hasn't worked, it's ended, and now suddenly he doesn't know what, he's lost his inspiration effectively, and everything he does, it just comes undone. That's again referencing to the self-loathing that he's going through, and that's something that we can all kind of attest to in some way, shape or form. Not everyone's quite heavily impacted from it, but certainly when it's a loving and long relationship, it certainly becomes much harder to break those ties, and certainly does feel like the hardest part. Diving straight into another slow track now with number 11, Swallowed in the Sea, and we're keeping this storyline rolling with this particular track. It's almost like it's kind of a post-breakup effectively, about trying to win somebody back. They're made for each other, but they're kind of stuck inside their own heads, and there's now distance or the love that got away. There's kind of this reason that they can't get back together. There's also a kind of another way of looking at it. Swallowed in the sea, how often do you hear the phrase plenty more fish in the sea? It's almost like this person's gone off and kind of is exploring other options, other partners, by being swallowed in the sea. And this other person, it's almost like you've got, again, this divide, this X and Y, this yin and yang. One person wants to kind of get together, back together, make it work, and one other person's now swallowed in the sea and is looking for somebody else. Despite the fact that this person really wants to try, you belong with me, I could write a song 100 miles long. They're willing to go to the lengths to really make this work, and saying that you belong with me, not swallowed in the sea. You effectively belong spending your life with me, not with somebody else. And that's what it definitely attests to. Very metaphoric in a lot of the lyrics that are used for this particular track. As I say, it just very heavily seems to tie in with the idea of more fish in the sea, but you could look at it as effectively they're drowning in their own kind of depression or whatever caused the rift between the two people. That's kind of another reference or another way of looking at it, where you could take that option away and just say like it's somebody that's kind of drowning in their own ailments or their own kind of head, and that's why they can't be part of that relationship. So definitely two sides, a very double-edged kind of song coming in at number 11, but definitely a very powerful one and continuing the storyline we've seen throughout most of the album. So we're finally going to be twisting away from the love story that's not ended too particularly well. There's kind of this divide, there's been the hardest part, and now one of them's swallowed in the sea, and it's been a complete mess. But enough about that, that's in the past. We're moving on to track 12, which is Twisted Logic, and this takes a complete different, like a nosedive. We're taking a heavy left turn into a completely different subject with this one. It's all about taking care of the planet, that we are destroying it effectively, and that's shown through some of the lyrics again. Created, then drilled and invaded. So it's all about kind of the creation of the earth, how we're kind of invading it. And this twisted logic comes from the idea of we've kind of, this world's been created for us, and all we're doing is trying to destroy it, get rid of it, and harm it rather than looking after it. And obviously, especially in the mid-2000s, this was becoming a big subject. And although global warming continues to be this massive issue that is pretty much the whole world is now involved in, they're now taking steps to really try and rectify the situation and make sure that we actually still have a world in 100 years' time. But the song definitely kind of just comes as out of nowhere, really. I understand why it comes in at track 12 on the album. It really makes sense as to why it's here after we've had this kind of big story arc that's been taking us through from track 4 pretty much onwards. So it's nice to have that break. Again, we've maybe had track number 7, which was a little bit of a break as well in speed of sound, but definitely kind of a subject that's been important to the band. I think in recent years they've actually announced they were kind of stopping touring to kind of work and help build on like this whole going green idea, because obviously kind of traveling with the band and playing around the world is generating massive amounts of greenhouse gases. So it definitely a subject matter that is very important to them, and they wanted to include on X and Y. Time to round out the album with number 13, Till Kingdom Come. And this references straight back to track 1. We started off at square one, now Till Kingdom Come. It's talking about the end of life effectively, about death comes to us all effectively. So obviously it does have that kind of vibe to it. Also, if you've heard this song before, you kind of probably recognise it had a very country vibe. It didn't feel like a Coldplay track, and that's because it was actually intended to be a collaboration with Johnny Cash, which I wish it had happened. I really do. I think it would have been awesome to hear his input on the track, especially after he'd Hurt by Nine Inch Nails and a variety of other covers towards the end of his life. I really am gutted this didn't actually get to go ahead. But they kind of stuck with it. Obviously, following the passing of Johnny Cash, they didn't get to work with him, but definitely a song that kind of fits very well for the end of the album. You've gone from this start of life effectively to You Can Write the Rest of Your Life. We've gone through the main influence, which was obviously his wife, that's kind of influenced a lot of the music behind the actual album itself, and now I've got this important message at the end about kind of going to Kingdom Come effectively, whether it be heaven or the kind of this afterlife that people believe in. So it's kind of a nice way to round it out. It is, like I say, just a massive shame that it wasn't a collaboration that was meant to be. Obviously since then they've gone on to work with a variety of other artists. Jay-Z on Lost, they worked with Rihanna on Princess of China, and they've really kind of gone into their own with actually kind of including other artists in their music. So Johnny Cash didn't get to sadly be the first one to do so, but he certainly would have been quite an impactful character if it had gone ahead. So all in all, X and Y is definitely an album that takes us on quite the journey. So obviously a bit of a personal journey for Chris Martin as well, as we do see that very heavily influenced through most of the tracks featured. However, it does also have this beauty to it where it's very inclusive for the audience as well. He's done it in ways through metaphoric language, through some of the meanings that are so universally applicative to the listener that they can become part of the music. Something that Coldplay has really kind of worked on over the years. If you've ever seen a live show of theirs in recent years or seen videos of it, and they have the wristbands, it becomes a festival of colour. There's beach balls flying around. It becomes like a giant party, which is not something you'd probably think when you first heard this album back in 2005. But definitely give it a listen all the way through. Let me know if you have any differing opinions on some of the tracks, or kind of draw these different meanings from it. And I will see you in the next album autopsy.